Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into an idea that's over 2,000 years old from a philosopher named Zhuangzi. And honestly, it might just completely flip the script on how you think about your own value. So let's get into it.
So let me just start with a question. Do you ever get that feeling, that constant low-level buzz of anxiety in the back of your mind telling you that you should be doing more, being more productive, being more useful?
I mean, this feeling is just everywhere, isn't it? At work, in your social life, there's this nonstop pressure to prove your worth. And if you're not constantly hitting goals and checking boxes, it's so easy to feel like you're falling behind, like you're just not enough.
So here's our game plan for breaking this all down. We're going to start with that pressure we all know so well. Then we'll dive into two of Zhuangzi's most famous stories, one about a tree and a pretty confusing one about a goose. We'll see how context is everything, lay out a whole new way to think about value, and then finally, figure out how we can actually use this freedom in our own lives. All right, so let's tackle the problem head on. We are all stuck in this modern grind, constantly being pushed to be useful. But we're about to see how an ancient philosopher decided to challenge that very idea. Now here's where it gets really interesting. Over 2 millennia ago, Zhuangzi floated this totally radical idea. He basically looked at a world obsessed with purpose and productivity and asked, what if the real secret to survival, to freedom, is to actually embrace being useless?
To really get what he was talking about, we have to start with his most famous story, the fable of the useless tree. It's a powerful little lesson in survival.
So, the story goes like this. A master carpenter and his crew are out in the mountains, and they're on the hunt for some really high-quality wood. And then they stumble across this absolutely massive, ancient tree. He takes one look at it and just scoffs. To him, a useful tree has a straight trunk and smooth grain. This thing, it's a mess. He basically tells his apprentices, forget it, this is junk wood. It's completely worthless. But the story takes a bit of a weird turn. That night, the carpenter has a dream, and who shows up to talk to him? The tree. This thing he just called useless is about to speak its mind. And the tree just lays it out for him. It says, you think I'm useless? My uselessness is the very reason I'm still alive. All those straight, strong, useful trees, they got the axe a long, long time ago. And boom, there's the point. The tree survived because it didn't fit anyone's idea of what it was supposed to be. Its biggest flaw was actually its greatest strength. Okay, so the lesson seems simple, right? Just be useless and you'll survive. Got it. Well, not so fast. Zhuangzi, being the brilliant thinker he was, immediately tells another story that completely messes with that idea. So Zhuangzi and his students are feeling pretty good, thinking they've cracked the code of uselessness. They stop by a friend's place, and to welcome them, the friend decides to cook up a special meal. Now, the friend has 2 geese. He asks his servant, which one should we cook? The servant says, well, one of them can hunk, and the other one can't. The owner's reply is instant. Kill the one that can't hunk. So, wait a minute. The useless goose is the one that gets killed. The tree survived by being useless, but the goose was killed for the exact same reason. You can imagine how completely baffled Zhuangzi's students were. And this brings us to the real lesson. Useful and useless aren't permanent labels. To sort out this paradox, Zhuangzi tells one more story that shows how value is all about context and, really, imagination. This story is just fantastic. Okay, so you've got this family with a secret recipe for hand cream. For them, its use is pretty small and practical. It just helps them do laundry in the cold. But then a stranger comes along and sees a much bigger potential. He buys the formula, takes the exact same stuff to the military, and uses it to help the Navy win a battle in the dead of winter because their hands don't crack. For this big use, he becomes a lord. Same formula, totally different vision. It just goes to show you, the use of a thing isn't built in. It's all about how you apply it. So how do we tie all this together? We've got a tree, a goose, some hand cream. What's the actual takeaway here? Let's see if we can build a practical framework out of these stories. So, based on all this, we can kind of distill Zhuangzi's philosophy down into 4 big ideas. First, everything has a potential use, even if we can't see it right now. Second, like we saw with the ointment, that use can be small or it can be huge, depending on the context.
Third, everything's connected. What seems useless to you today might be the key to something important tomorrow. And finally, the real skill isn't to be one or the other, but to have the wisdom to navigate between them.
And this is the ultimate goal, the punchline. When his students asked him what they should be, useful or useless, this was his answer. It's not a rule. It's about having the flexibility and wisdom to know when to show your skills and when to embrace your uselessness to protect yourself and maybe even thrive.
Okay, so what does this all mean for us right now in our world of performance reviews and social media highlight reels? How can a 2,000-year-old philosophy actually help us with all that? Zhuangzi's advice really comes down to this core principle you see on the screen. It basically means you learn to adapt to the world on the outside. You play the game, you meet the demands, you navigate society, but you do it all without letting those external things change who you are on the inside. Your core self stays authentic, stays true. The true lesson of that crooked tree is that its worth was never about what the carpenter thought it was for. Its worth was in its own existence, giving shade, being a home for birds, just being itself. And it's the same for us. Your real value isn't a label that somebody else slaps on you. It's already there, just by virtue of you being you. And that leaves us with one final thought to chew on. In a world that is always demanding that we measure our worth in bullet points and achievements, Zhuangzi invites us to think about a different kind of value altogether. The value of our unique perspective, our quiet moments, our so-called useless hobbies that just bring us joy. What if the most useful thing you could possibly do is just be, unapologetically, yourself?